Over the last few years I've become less and less interested in the initial styling of raw material for bonsai. Having been messing around with trees for over 30 years now, I've been lucky enough to put together a half decent collection here, and so my focus has really been on refining and developing those trees and really taking them to a much higher level. This raw material business to me is always a bit sort of hack it and whack it. It's a bit rough and ready, and at the end of it, it may look completely transformed, but I'm well aware of the years that will be required to turn that into bonsai. But just for the hell of it today, I thought we'd have a go at this Taxus. Now, I bought half a dozen of these from a local grower about 4 years ago. He told me they were planted as liners in 1997 and been on his nursery ever since. When they came to me, they were about 8 foot tall, and so the first thing I had to do obviously was remove most of that and bin it. Fortunately the grower had left by then, and so that was done in the springtime, and then in the following August the trees were completely bare rooted, all the soil was removed, and they were planted in these small pots in a good mix containing largely pumice. And as you can see, this has grown really well since. Initially it was more or less a bare stump with just a few little shoots poking out of it, but now you can see it's grown really well. There's a couple of feet of growth on here. The growth is strong, it's thick, it's springy, the soil is absolutely full of roots, and so this tree is fighting fit. It's winter time. These have had a couple of frosts, which I always prefer with a Taxus. It's much easier than styling them in the summer when there's lots of sap, because then you tend to lose more branches. Styling in the depths of winter when it's cold, for me, has always worked extremely well. And so today we're going to have a crack at this and see what we can make. We've got our important supplies here. We've got one of these. We've got a branch cutter and some wire. Apart from that, we need a little imagination, and then we'll see what we can make. So let's have a closer look at this. So here you can see we've got a nice solid trunk, fairly typical of a U, sort of one piece at the base, which then forks into multiple trunks. We've got, as you always do seem to have with a U, one or two ugly roots that we can deal with, and then when we get up into here, you can see that it just splits into a whole bunch of trunks. And if I just spin this around for you, you can see this side more ugly roots, straight branches, really nothing going for it at all. If we come up here, you can see where I cut the height out of this, and all of these branches here have grown since that was done, and so here's the cut. So every one of these trunks has been reduced at some point, as you can see, but when you buy stuff like this, it's kind of a bit of a lottery, and you get what you get, and I didn't get much with this one, unfortunately. But from here we've got a fairly solid trunk, and within here what I was careful to do, if you can see, we kept one or two of the nice smaller branches like here, lots of forking on those, another one over here, another one over here. So they, and obviously these lower branches, so we're going to be able to use these for the initial styling of this tree. As you'll know from previous videos, I'm something of a stickler for healthy trees, and so if look in here, we can see this particular shoot. There's 1 year's growth, there's another year's growth, and this here is the last year's growth. Now we can tell it's strong because it's growing upright. You can see it's a nice strong growth, lots of side branches on those, lots of big needles, and there's that type of growth coming out of absolutely everywhere. We've got buds absolutely everywhere. We've got nice big needles, as you can see here, strong growth, and where are we? Strong growth, buds all the way along it. So this tree is fighting fit. Another thing that's important for use, we move the soil here. Here are the roots, and roots are important for trees, and we like to see that. So my method of working is always with any collected trees or any field grown trees, as in this case, the first thing we want to do is get those roots right, because once this in here is working properly, there's no problem getting all this. And because we're going to be removing most of this today, this tree needs to be strong because I want it to bounce back next summer and grow profusely, and that's exactly what it will do. Talking to people as I go about my business, I get that a lot of people are quite often overwhelmed by a tree like this, and they always tell me, well, where do you start? Well, the first place to start is in the most obvious thing that you can't deal with, and for me this big thick root, very typical of yews, field grown, really ugly. It's been cut back and there's very little on the end, so the first thing I'm going to do is remove this, and then once that's done, that will lead us to the next step. So all we've got to do is just chew this out. Now that big root's removed, we can tidy this up. Looking closely, you can see here we've got some live bark and we've got some dead over the top. So I'm just going to use a little tool to chase that back, see where that goes, and then we can smarten this up a little. So now that's cleaned up, you can see we've got this nice little shari coming up through here, which has all just died back naturally, and that then runs up to these two here. This one, the front of it's dead, but there is a branch on that on the back, but I'm not going to use that. This one has got some really useful growth on it, so for now we're going to keep that. So what I'm going to do now is take that one out, because I know I definitely don't need that. So now this is the part that we've removed. You can see it's quite a big thick lump, but looking at the shari here that we've uncovered, and as we come up here you can see a gap where that was removed. In the back there's another thick one that we're going to have to get to from the other side, but if you see straight away, removing that one piece has lightened the top of that trunk, because to a certain degree we might have some reverse taper on here because all the branches are going upwards and outwards and getting wider, so we need to try and correct that as best that we can. And so opening up this this area here has really helped that. And this one here, you can see he's got lots of good branches on the end. So what I'm now going to do is just do the tip of that where that was cut down and just reduce that a little bit, and then we can move on to the next one. So one by one I've been removing branches that I don't need here, and looking from the back you can see we had a big dead piece in the middle which we've got rid of. This one's still to do, and you can see where the ends were cut, we've just tapered those down, and now we've got this big one here, and hopefully you can see all the branches on that are on one side, and it's got no taper at all, it's just one long straight big pole. So now what I'm going to do, get rid of this big knuckle in the top and thin this down a little bit to give it a little bit of taper, and that'll be most of the material we don't need removed. The last job to do here with the power tool is just to begin the process of developing some live veins here. One of the natural characteristics of yew that they tend to do this type of thing where you get some dieback and then a live part and a dead part and so on and so forth. So in time we end up with these nice live veins that are really attractive, and so in order to begin to create those live veins, what I'm going to do is just remove a couple of areas of bark just in the direction that the sap is flowing, and then progressively those will enlarge, or they can be enlarged, and then over time they will make some very attractive live veins. And the way I do that is again just using one of these little tools, and we're just taking the bark, we're not looking to remove any wood here. And an important thing here is that the bark is cut nice and square. We don't want to feather the bark this way because we'll get a lot of dieback and it'll then roll and lift up. So by cutting this nice and clean with a nice straight edge, then that will heal real nicely, and progressively these parts begin to fatten. That bit basically sort of appears to drop, and it gives the tree a lot more character and more interest. So day 2 of this little Taxus project. Got bastard cold out here last night, so as soon as sun went down I packed up, went in and put my feet up by the fire. But you can see we've done all the carving, we've got rid of all the bits of wood that we didn't need, just sort of rough shaped everything and opened this up quite nicely. And I also had time to get in and clean the branch structure out ready for wiring. As you can see here, that basically involves plucking the old needles from the lignified twigs and then cleaning out all the forks in the branches, so that when we come to wire this, it's nice and easy, nice and clean, and the wiring will work really well. I don't like to take too much foliage off evergreens. It's hard enough to grow any leaf in this country in the first place, and so the less we take off, the less we're going to have to grow back. So I'm hoping that everything we've got here we're going to be able to use and incorporate in the final design of this tree. So here we are with the finished tree. It's taken about 5 hours to get this far, and I'm reasonably happy with the result. Bearing in mind this was growing in a farmer's field 2.5 years ago, I think it's come a long way in that time. It's important to me that we work on the roots first, and then we can worry about the rest of it later. As I said at the beginning, trees like this I always find a little scruffy, a little coarse, and of course they've got a long way to go. Based on my experience over the years, it was going to take about 10 years all told to produce what I would call a passable bonsai tree from material like this. But one of the things that's really important in bonsai is, if you're going to make bonsai trees rather than just buy them, you're going to have to start, and you're going to have to start somewhere, and ideally start with what you've got. It would be ideal if we could have a much better quality piece of material and make a much more dramatic result. But at the end of the day, this is the type of trees that I cut my teeth on. In the first 10 years of doing bonsai, I was busy styling trees like this constantly. I didn't photograph them, I didn't show them to anybody, I didn't put them online, I didn't take them out there for the world to see. You hone your craft at home with practice. And one of the things I can tell you categorically, you will never ever learn to style a tree like this watching videos. You have to get out and you have to do the work. And it's a continual repetition that teaches your hands and your brain to work in unison and to make bonsai. And so once you finish watching this video, might I suggest that you go outside, grab something and start work. If you're new, perhaps the work won't be very good, but you'll have learnt something, and the next tree will be better, and the next tree will be better, and the next one will be better. And eventually you'll reach a point whereby you can turn almost anything into bonsai, and it might not be particularly good, it might not be classic like this, it'll never be a show winning tree, but it's something. And like I said, considering it was in a field 2 years ago, I think it's a reasonable result. So hopefully this has given you some ideas and some inspiration, and as I said, it's time to get busy, go do some work.